Happy Thursday, everybody. Pastor Steve here. Today in our Bible reading plan for our devotion, we are in 1 Samuel chapter 7, the story of David and Goliath, probably one of the better known stories in the Bible. And after reading this chapter again, and I've read it many times over the years, as I'm sure you have, what I wrote in my journal, because this is what stood out to me and God touched my heart with, is to guard against worldly tactics when doing God's work. Be careful when it comes to worldly tactics as it relates to the work of God. Now in this chapter, David fights and kills Goliath. And you know the story. Goliath, this giant more than 9 feet tall with his armor and his sword. And David with his sling and his 5 smooth stones. And he kills the giant. A few things I want to point out real quickly. First, in chapter 17 at verses 36 and 37, David obviously knew this was God's battle, not his, that he was simply the instrument. Verses 36 and following, your servant has killed both the lion and the bear. He tells King Saul about a bear and about a lion attacking the sheep that he was watching for his father, and he killed both of them to protect the sheep. And he says, this uncircumcised Philistine will be like one of them, since he has taunted the armies of the living God. You see, when Goliath was making fun of the army, he wasn't making fun just of the men of Israel. He was making fun of God because it was God's army, God's people. Verse 37, David said, the Lord who delivered me from the paw of the lion and from the paw of the bear, he will deliver me from the hand of this Philistine. So he knew it was God's war, God's battle. And when he fought Goliath, he didn't use the typical tactics of war. In fact, when he walks out there as this young man with no armor and no sword, and just a sling and some rocks and a bag, Goliath is offended and becomes angry. And remember, Goliath is dressed in all of this armor from head to toe, and he's carrying this big sword, javelin. And in verses 36 and 37, verses 45 and following, 45, David said to the Philistine, to Goliath, you come to me with a sword, a spear, and a javelin. Well, he had a lot of weapons. And I come to you in the name of the Lord. You're coming to me with physical, worldly weapons. I'm coming to you in the name of the Lord of hosts, the God of the armies of Israel, whom you have taunted. This day the Lord will deliver you into my hands, and I will strike you down and remove your head from you. And I will give the dead bodies of the army of the Philistines this day to the birds of the sky and the wild beasts of the earth, that all the earth may know that there is a God in Israel, and that all this assembly may know, all these armies, the Israeli army, the Philistine army, that the Lord does not deliver by sword or by spear, for the battle is the Lord's, and he will give you into our hands. Wow. There's a lesson there for us. And maybe I'm spiritualizing this a little bit, I'll admit that, but I still think there's a principle, there's a lesson. We need to be careful in life, in business, in politics, in sports, and all of our endeavors, that we don't allow the tactics of the world to compromise our integrity, our values, our attitudes, our behavior. It's one of the challenges for Christians in business sometimes, or in politics sometimes, and even in sports. We can be corrupted into thinking that to win, we have to do it the world's way. And you may win short term, but you're going to lose the favor of God, because God doesn't honor it when we use worldly sinful tactics, even for good purposes. You know the old saying, the end justifies the means? No, it doesn't. Jesus said, what does it profit a man if he gains the whole world but loses his soul? There is something to be said for letting God fight our battles and us doing what is right. Because sometimes in the short term it may look like we lose, but actually in the long term we win because God favors us. Don't compromise who you are as a follower of Christ and your integrity and your ethics. And don't compromise the fruit of the Spirit or the definition of love in 1 Corinthians 13 to win today's battle. Because in doing so, you might lose tomorrow's war. That's the word for today, brothers, sisters.